Unfinished sentence at 9:47 on a Tuesday, my phone vibrated as I cleaned the grill. Take a break. Don't contact me. A brief text without closure. 2 dogs we'd shared for 8 years and a mortgage 3 payments behind waited while I worked past midnight. The kitchen still needed restocking by 6 a.m., yet I didn't halt for a text, instead rereading it multiple times. 8 years of our lives sent like an afterthought amidst dinner service. I contemplated calling, but only for about half a minute. Instead, I opened my email to find a contract offer from Callaway Group sitting in the drafts folder, one I'd nearly sent 4 times since October. A new establishment is opening downtown with me as the head chef. It's a genuine budget and my name on the menu. I had delayed this move due to her, as she always hinted we were on the verge of something greater at Ember. She used to say, "Just wait." I decided to stop waiting. I clicked send at 9:53 p.m., then looked back at her message and typed 6 words, already one step ahead. Goodbye. After finishing the grill, locking up, and driving home in silence, her name appeared on my phone screen at 10:22 p.m. with a message. Wait, what do you mean? No question mark, just palpable confusion disguised as uncertainty. However, I should clarify that 6 months prior to this message, Ember was a place where reservations for Fridays had to be made 2 weeks in advance. With only 38 seats and an open kitchen, it showcased my food, my menu, and my relationships with 3 farms outside the city, which I had painstakingly developed. I constructed that kitchen from scratch using second-hand equipment and a leaky walk-in fridge. A cook who wasn't fluent in English labored diligently twice as much as anyone else I employed, while Diane oversaw the front of operations. This was our system. I handled the kitchen. She managed the dining area. Somehow within this structure we also shared a marriage. It functioned effectively, at least for a duration. However, I observed discrepancies. Initially, subtle signs such as her staying past closing hours when the dining area was quiet, claiming it was paperwork or bookkeeping. I trusted her explanation because I preferred to believe her and often lacked energy to probe further. Then Marcus Holt began visiting. His initial appearances were monthly, then bi-weekly, eventually making Thursday a regular visit. He always occupied the same secluded table, always brought the same Borillo wine we kept for him. Owner of 4 restaurants in the metropolitan area, he was known for his lavish timepiece and conspicuous display of wealth. Diane consistently seated him herself. I convinced myself this was merely exceptional service. You cater to your high-spending clients, making them feel as though the establishment is exclusively theirs. For a long time, that was something I believed. But one Thursday in August, upon exiting the kitchen to address a table complaint, I saw her chuckling at his words. It wasn't her usual work laughter. It was the one reserved for challenging customers. However, this time there was an unfamiliar quality, a rarity I hadn't seen in a while. She didn't seem to notice my presence. Back in the kitchen, I quickly processed the next order. That evening, she returned home and shared that Marcus found her impressive, hinting at a potential managing director role in his new location. I simply responded with, "That's great." She questioned my enthusiasm, to which I replied about an early morning delivery. A silence filled the room afterward, a stranger neither of us welcomed. In my eagerness to focus on cooking, I erred by thinking that everything else would take care of itself, maintaining the menu, keeping the reviews positive. In September, we received a feature in the city magazine with 3 stars. They specifically praised our duck confit and described the kitchen as subtly ambitious. I pasted a copy of it on the cooler door, but Diane didn't comment. She was engrossed in her phone when I showed her. She merely nodded, said, "That's good, babe," and continued typing. I convinced myself she was preoccupied and that the restaurant was going through a development period, with Diane handling more than I could perceive from within the kitchen. Despite this, Marcus started working there on Thursdays and occasionally Tuesdays as well. I began noticing that the atmosphere in the restaurant subtly changed when he arrived. The staff moved differently, and so did Diane. She stood taller, walked slower, giving an impression of being consciously observed yet unperturbed. One Tuesday, I finished early and went out front for a drink. There, I saw her seated across from him at his table, not the usual managerial position by the side of the table. Instead, she was sitting, leaning slightly forward. She held her wine glass in both hands. I lingered in the kitchen threshold for roughly 5 seconds. She caught my gaze, a vague expression, not quite remorse but rather calculation, flashed across her face. She spoke to Marcus, then rose and approached me as if nothing transpired. She mentioned a private event, a major acquisition, entire weekend. I was merely gathering information. You were drinking with him, just 1 glass, it's hospitality. I chose to overlook it. That was the error. not challenging it, not inquiring further, not expressing my true sentiments. Instead, I returned to the kitchen to prepare for the next service, demonstrating my best employee skills. 3 days subsequently, she entered home with a new, expensive jacket, the type she had claimed we couldn't afford 2 months prior when I broached the topic of fixing the water heater. I acknowledged it, but remained silent. That was the second blunder. The private event unfolded during the second weekend of October. A full buyout, both days, Friday and Saturday. Marcus hosted 40 guests, offering an open bar and a custom menu that he and Diane seemed to have collaborated on during 3 unbeknownst to me meetings. I discovered these gatherings in the same way as I learned about many other things, not from her, but from Eddie, my prep cook, who incidentally mentioned it during our Saturday night debriefing. He had casually remarked, "Your wife and that Holt guy put a lot of effort into this." I realized she was here till nearly midnight on Wednesday, a fact I learned on that same day since I was home that night. Alone. She had informed me she was doing inventory, but I remained silent and continued wrapping. However, upon calculating the schedule on my way home, I noticed 3 meetings, at least one occurring past midnight, a menu devised without me within my own restaurant for my kitchen, and she returned home Wednesday at exactly 12:43 a.m. I recall this moment because I checked my phone when I heard the door. She explained that the numbers ran long, to which I simply replied, "Okay." I still don't understand why I kept saying okay. The gathering turned out splendidly, exceptionally so. Marcus subsequently entered the kitchen. He extended his hand, praised my culinary skills, yet his compliments had a possessive tone as if assessing something he already owned. "You've created something genuine here," he said. "Diane is fortunate to collaborate with such talent. Not you two, but just Diane." I observed him returning to the floor and conversing with her by the champagne table. Her smile was not prompted by a glance my way. That's what stood out to me. Not the smile or the champagne, but the lack of need to confirm if I was watching. Upon returning home, an email from Callaway Group awaited me. It had been there since early October, unopened twice before. This time I read every word. The truth about my discovery is not impressive. It was straightforward. The offer was sitting in my inbox since the beginning of October. I'd briefly scanned it twice and discarded it both times. On this occasion, I delved into each line. I didn't employ anyone or snoop through her phone like some sort of investigation. Instead, on a Thursday in November when I had no business being there, I stayed past closing time. The service ended at 10 and most staff were gone by 10:45. I informed Eddie I'd secure the premises, sent him home, and remained in the kitchen feigning oven temperature adjustments. In reality, I was waiting, a fact I didn't fully acknowledge until later. Marcus was still at his table corner at 11 while Diane was on the floor. At 11:15, I heard the front door lock from inside. Emerging from the kitchen, I found an empty and dark dining room, save for a dim light above his table. 2 glasses, a bottle, and Diane standing near enough to him that there wasn't any professional justification for their proximity. She had her hand on his chest. He was whispering something, and she was nodding. For a moment, neither seemed aware of my presence in the kitchen doorway. Then she turned, the hand fell away, and I became visible. However, not swiftly. That was the hardest blow, not swiftly, as if she needed to force herself to move. No one spoke for a prolonged period. Then Marcus picked up his glass, took a leisurely sip, and placed it back down as if I were an uninvited staff member. Diane called out my name, only my name, nothing after it. I stared at her for a few moments before looking at him. After that, I retreated to the kitchen, retrieved my knife roll from the shelf, and exited through the back door. I sat in my truck for approximately 20 minutes. I didn't weep. I didn't vent my anger. I simply sat there with the engine off and the knife roll on the passenger seat, and I pondered the fact that she had locked the front door from within while I was still inside the building. She knew I was there. She chose to do it anyway. I returned home. She wasn't back yet. I prepared coffee, remained at the kitchen table, and opened the Callaway email for the 3rd time. This time I read it as if it were already mine. She arrived home at 12:30. At the kitchen table, my coffee had grown cold, and the unread Callaway email remained open on my laptop. She entered from the hallway, spotting me there, and paused in the doorway. Her coat was on, keys still clutched in her hand, as if she hadn't fully decided to stay. She suggested we needed to talk, and I agreed. Taking a seat opposite me, she left her coat undisturbed. She claimed it wasn't what it seemed. Marcus was grappling with troubles in his marriage, and she had provided a listening ear. She admitted the situation became intricate, but insisted it wasn't serious and she was managing it. I listened intently without interruption until she concluded. Upon her conclusion, I inquired about its duration. A few months, she replied, avoiding eye contact with the table. I acknowledged this with a nod, closed my laptop, and chose not to reveal the Callaway email or my decision to leave. Instead, I stated that I required time to consider things, then retired to bed. This is where I erred. I feigned deliberation, but in truth, my decision was made the instant I saw her hand slip from his chest casually. I remained silent, giving her a false sense of control over the situation. For the subsequent 3 weeks, she attempted to navigate it. She maintained a professional distance from Marcus when I was present at work and arrived home punctually. She even cooked twice during this period, something she hadn't done in months. She expressed interest in the menu, the farms, and our shared past, questions she had not asked for a long time. I responded cordially and remained attentive enough to help her unwind. Simultaneously, I was executing 3 tasks: finalizing the Callaway contract, discreetly informing my top chefs about an impending change and inquiring if they'd join me, and contacting our landlord for details on terminating the lease for our house. By week's end, I had the required information, and then her message arrived. "I require some distance. Please don't contact me." I pondered why she opted to message instead of voicing it directly. My conjecture is that she believed it offered her dominance. A text is impersonal, no facial expressions to interpret, no pauses to endure. You send it and then wait for the recipient's response, gauging their distress. She observed my reactions over 3 weeks, the cautious dinners, the inquiries about the menu, the entire performance. Somewhere along the line, she concluded I was clinging on, that I depended on her more than I was exhibiting. Thus, the text served as a test. Withdraw abruptly. Assess if he pursues. I did not pursue. I responded with 6 words and stowed my phone in the glove compartment. By the time I returned home that night, the Callaway contract had already been countersigned and resubmitted. My line cooks, Danny and Priya, both agreed to join me. I had a storage unit rented under my name with 2 months' payment in advance, and I scheduled an appointment with a family law attorney for the following Monday morning. I wasn't hastening anything. Instead, I sought clarity about our situation before she could alter the narrative. The next day, as usual, I went to work. She was absent, reportedly calling in sick for the first time in 2 years. Marcus also missed work that Thursday. The workplace functioned smoothly without her, which I observed and mentally noted. By the week's end, I had gathered my belongings from the house: clothes, cast iron pots from my grandmother, quality knives, and a folder of financial records I had compiled during the past 10 days. I completed this task over 2 early mornings while she slept peacefully. There was no confrontation or announcement involved. The final morning, as I packed, I prepared coffee before leaving and left a full pot behind, an old habit. After packing up, I took my bag and departed without leaving a note or saying goodbye. Only a cold pot of coffee remained on the counter. She called 4 times that afternoon. Each time I let it go to voicemail. During the 5th call, she didn't cry, an unexpected occurrence. She was composed yet furious, the kind triggered by feelings of being victimized instead of the aggressor. She accused me of exaggerating, claimed I was retaliating for something long past, claimed our shared life was at stake because I was overreacting to a confessed error. She allowed her argument to conclude. Then I revealed I'd signed with Callaway Group, informed her that Danny and Priya would join me, scheduled an attorney appointment for Monday, suggesting she should do the same. A brief pause ensued, around 4 seconds, but I recognized it as a sign of her reconsideration, recalculating a situation she deemed resolved. She asserted, "You orchestrated this." I replied, "I had choices, I exercised them." She ended the call. For 9 days, there was no contact from her. During those 9 days, I secured a 1-bedroom furnished apartment close to Callaway's location, paid first and last month's rent, slept on an unfamiliar mattress, and waited for her recalculation. I dined at the restaurant counter on most evenings during the construction phase, sampling and tweaking dishes to make the kitchen feel like home. It all felt comfortably routine. Eddie kept me informed of updates as he remained with Ember, seemingly pledging allegiance towards me. Marcus subtly withdrew, not with a dramatic exit or confrontation, but by decreasing his visits. Our Thursday reservation ceased, and the hold on the Burlow went unused for 2 weeks before another customer requested it. Diane continued to oversee the floor, yet the discussions about the managing director position had unexpectedly stalled, with no explanation offered. Eddie observed that she seemed tired. I chose not to comment, but pondered her late Thursday nights and her recent investment in a new jacket, as well as the meetings I was left unaware of, all in pursuit of a role now seemingly dormant. Stalled, moving nowhere. The lawyer contacted me on a Wednesday, delivering the opening documents. I signed where necessary and promptly returned them. That Friday, Callaway announced its arrival for the first time on their social media. The post was plain, devoid of pomp. It only featured a crisp image of the new venue, exposed brick, open kitchen, bright lighting. Accompanied by 2 lines, Chef Ryan Mercer is joining our upcoming launch. More to come. That was all. I chose not to share it or comment on it. Instead, I let it be and watch it unfold. By Sunday, it had amassed 400 likes and a section filled with familiar faces, regular Ember guests, mostly food writers who'd previously featured us, a few industry figures who knew my work. Someone even tagged the city magazine that had highlighted our duck confit dish. I skimmed through the comments once before putting my phone aside and returning to work. On Monday, Diane's lawyer delivered a rebuttal to the initial filing. She was challenging the asset division. Regarding Ember's goodwill value, she claimed ownership due to my restaurant reputation being established during our marriage. This warranted her a share of its worth. I was informed by my attorney. He mentioned this wasn't an uncommon dispute, and we would counter it. He advised me to remain composed and avoid impulsive actions. While I didn't react, I stayed vigilant because Ember's reputation was primarily linked to the food, as evidenced in numerous write-ups about the kitchen, sourcing, and menu. Her name appeared only once every 3 years in press, mostly in photo captions. From the onset, I had kept records, supplier contracts, recipe development notes with dates, and emails from farms, magazines, and event clients, most of which were addressed to me. Later that day, I shared these pertinent files with my attorney. However, I made a different move by contacting Eddie, not for Diane-related matters or information gathering, but to discuss a separate issue. Did I propose a job opportunity to him? There was a brief pause, followed by his inquiry about when it would be required. I informed him that opening night was approximately 11 weeks away. I also shared the position's remuneration and requested him to ponder over it. Within 20 minutes, he contacted me back. Thus, I had my complete kitchen staff assembled. On the way home, I inadvertently passed by Ember. It was just on the route. The interior lights were on, and through the front window, I could see the floor and a few tables with late-night patrons. The typical Thursday vibe persisted. I didn't slow down, but at the next signal, my phone buzzed. It was Diane, not a call, but a text. The message read, "I saw your job post. We should discuss this before it progresses for both our benefits." I reread it twice at the red light. Once the light turned green, I drove on without responding immediately. I didn't answer the following day either. That day, I visited the Callaway space at 7 a.m., was inspecting the kitchen with the contractor, and approving the hood installation. Spent 4 hours examining the latest assortment with Danny as Prio went through the list we'd prepared for 3 weeks, transforming the space into a genuine kitchen. It reeked like one too. I replied to Diane's text that night briefly. "Have your lawyer contact mine." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she called back 20 minutes later. I answered this time since I was done ignoring unanswered matters. That chapter of my life had ended. She said she wasn't calling about the divorce. She mentioned an unexpected issue at Ember, requiring my attention. Her tone was different than usual, not the previous controlled anger, something subtler than that. She disclosed the ownership group had hired an external evaluator to assess the restaurant's performance for the last quarter. She claimed the earnings were deteriorating significantly. She also mentioned that 3 of our regular Thursday tables had switched their long-standing reservations to a different establishment across town. She paused. She mentioned that they inquired about you. The ownership group wishes to know if there's any chance you might return. Pausing for a moment, I considered their question. 8 months ago, such an inquiry may have elicited some emotion, perhaps relief or satisfaction at being desired. However, standing amidst the dust of my soon-to-be restaurant, I felt nothing akin to relief. I replied, "Tell them no." After a prolonged silence, she asked an unexpected question. "Are you all right?" I looked at the building with its dark windows and noticed the sign that would soon bear my name. I affirmed my well-being, meaning it sincerely. "Good night, Diane." I hung up and stood in the cold for a while before re-entering to complete the evening's prep list. The grand opening was scheduled for late February on a Tuesday. 44 fully booked seats, with Danny managing the waiting list from his phone during service. We executed 2 complete rotations and served 106 tables without a single return. I remained in the kitchen throughout, not due to avoidance, but because it's where I belong, and I realized this more deeply than before. The kitchen has always been the focal point. Everything else, the marriage, the agreement, the years of accommodating and adapting, was constructed around it, not the other way around. A journalist from the city magazine visited the first week unannounced, eating anonymously. 12 days later, they published a 4-star review, once more highlighting the duck confit. This time, I deliberately included it on the revised menu and had my name featured in the headline. Instead of displaying it on the cooler door this time, I kept the printed copy with me. I folded it and placed it in a folder with supplier contracts and lawyer documents, along with other items I had assembled myself. Eddie displayed his own copy near the dish station without informing me. On a Wednesday morning, I observed it but remained silent. I began my inventory check then. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday. My attorney contacted me at 2:17 in the afternoon while I was working. I thanked him and returned the call to the next customer. The argument over assets didn't prevail. Ember's goodwill was deemed indivisible from my professional persona and creative input. She received her share of the joint accounts and proceeds from the house sale. I retained my name and its value. I learned later that Marcus ceased visiting Ember entirely in March without providing an explanation. He simply disappeared. The conversation with the managing director never resumed. Diane continued to work there and manage the floor. 20 feet from where she once held her title, I rarely ponder over her now. This isn't something I boastfully acknowledge as an achievement. It's merely how things unfolded. Some Tuesday evenings, I find myself at the pass during the final hour of service when the kitchen falls silent. I can then distinctly hear the dining room, the soft clinking of glasses, hushed conversations, and the unique sound of people savoring their meals without haste. This space, in its current form, I've largely assembled. My name graced the sign a week after our grand opening. Modest typography devoid of frills. I drove by it for the first time on the morning it was unveiled. Didn't stop then, merely slowed down to read it. Subsequently, I parked in the lot and delved into my prep work. Thank you for listening to my story till the end. Feel free to share your thoughts below. More unspoken tales are on their way.